Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Part 28, The Dimensional Echo. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. We now stand at the sacred summit of Episode 8, the pure abstract language. Our ascent has been long and profound. From the solitary seed of phi, we have watched the growth of an entire linguistic cosmos. We have mapped the alphabet of change, the grammar of relation, the semantics of meaning, the economics of information, and the architecture of dimensionality. In our recent parts, we performed a deep excavation. We isolated, purified, and named the three primordial axes of all experience: time as sequence, space as coexistence, and motion as transformation. We treated each one as if it were alone, so that we could see its pure outline. But that separation was always artificial. It was a helpful illusion, a way of slowing the film so that each frame could be studied. Today, we perform the final act of synthesis. We bring the three purified strands back together and see what they have always been: one braid, one light refracted through a prism, one voice singing in three harmonies at the same time. We complete Book 8.7, Abstract Dimensionality, with the revelation that was already hidden in our very first mantra. This part is called the dimensional echo. Before we dive more deeply into this echo, let us pause and remember where this fits inside the larger holophase language tree. At the very beginning of this audio journey, we introduced phi as the single field from which everything else emerges. We then built the language in layers. We started with the raw alphabet of change, the simple ways phi can vary. We organized that alphabet into a grammar, showing how derivatives behave and combine. We added semantics, explaining how patterns of phi can carry meaning. We discussed information and compression, showing how phi can store, transmit, and transform structure economically. Then, in this later part of Episode 8, we turn to dimensionality itself, asking, when phi expresses itself, how does it create the feeling of a world with a before and after, a here and there, and a sense that things actually happen? The three axes we have named, time, space, and motion, are the answer to that question. They are not decorations on top of the language. They are the basic directions in which the language can be read. Time is the reading along the storyline. Space is the reading across the page. Motion is the reading of how one page leads to the next. Every other feature of reality that we will later describe, forces, fields, particles, waves, matter, energy, even minds, will be built on top of these three basic readings of phi. So when we talk about the dimensional echo, we are not adding a side detail. We are touching the very heart of how the one field becomes a lived world. We are learning to keep all three readings nearby in our awareness so that we never get trapped in a one-dimensional view. The core message of this part is simple. Whenever phi expresses itself, it always speaks in three voices at once. Every genuine structure in the holophase language has a temporal phase, a spatial phase, and a motional phase. You can emphasize one, but you can never truly remove the others. Imagine a beam of pure white light. It looks simple and featureless. You point it at a glass prism, and the beam fans out into a spectrum of colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Now you can see distinctions inside what previously looked like a single thing. You could spend a lifetime studying only the red band, measuring its wavelength, its energy, its behavior with matter. You could do the same for the blue band, and you would discover different properties. Yet you would be studying different expressions of the same light. If you now place a second inverted prism after the first, something beautiful happens. All those colored bands enter the second prism, and as they merge, they recombine back into a single beam of white light. The many reveals itself as one again. In this analogy, the white light is the living configuration of phi. The prism is our act of interpretation. The colors are the dimensional projections: time, space, and motion. When we pass phi through the prism of analysis, the single movement appears as a timeline, a spatial pattern, and a set of transformation rules. When we pass them back through the second prism of synthesis, we realize that there was never more than one field, one language, one reality. The dimensional echo is the fact that every phi pattern, no matter how simple or complex, automatically carries these three aspects. You cannot have a story without sequence, a pattern without coexistence, or a dance without transformation. At the deepest level, these three are not separate things. They are three ways of listening to the same song. To make this intuitive, let us use a more down-to-earth language example. Think of a powerful novel. For concreteness, imagine a long, rich story about a journey at sea. You can read such a novel in at least three different ways. First, you can read it as a sequence of events. This happened, then that, then that. The main character leaves home, boards a ship, faces storms, meets allies and enemies, and finally returns transformed. This is the time reading, the and then interpretation. Second, you can read the same novel as a map of relationships. Who is connected to whom? Who stands at the center of the social web? Which places and objects keep reappearing? The captain is here, symbolically at the center. The crew are arranged around him as different archetypes. The ocean is the vast surrounding environment. This is the space reading, the here and there interpretation. Third, you can read the novel as a dance of transformation. How does the main character change? How does hope turn into fear, and then into a deeper kind of courage? How does a peaceful sea become a symbol of threat? This is the motion reading, the therefore interpretation. Because this happened, therefore that new state arises. These are three readings of one and the same text. The text is the phi pattern. The three readings are the dimensional echoes. They never contradict each other. They emphasize different aspects of the same underlying structure. The same is true in physics. Take a simple traveling wave, a hump of energy moving steadily across a medium. In the time reading, you stay at one point in space and watch the value of the field rise, peak, and fall as the hump passes by. In the space reading, you freeze time and look at the whole shape of the hump across the medium at that moment. In the motion reading, you follow how the shape rearranges and propagates, encoded in the equation that links time changes and space changes together. One phenomenon, three valid descriptions. You can try this triune reading with almost anything. Consider a city. In the time reading, you tell its history. A small settlement grows at the river crossing. Roads are built, markets appear, wars and fires reshape it. New technologies arrive, skyscrapers rise, people move in and out. This is the sequence of becoming. In a space reading, you take a snapshot from above. You see districts, residential neighborhoods here, industrial areas there, parks in between, highways threading through. You trace the coexistence of many functions and communities within one urban body. In the motion reading, you focus on how the city changes and functions. People commute along predictable paths. Goods flow through supply chains. Money and information move through invisible networks. Laws, habits, and technologies provide the transformation rules. The city is not just a place or a history. It is a living process governed by motion. Already you can feel how natural this triune vision is. It is not an artificial addition. It is simply making conscious what your mind is already doing when it understands anything deeply. You can also see the dimensional echo by looking across different sciences and noticing how the same pattern repeats. In physics, a simple pendulum already shows it. In time, you watch it swing back and forth with a steady period. In space, you see its path as an arc between two extreme positions. In motion, you write down the rule. The restoring force is proportional to the displacement, which leads to oscillatory behavior. The three descriptions are all ways of speaking about one swinging mass on a string. In biology, consider the life of a cell. In time, it moves through stages: growth, DNA replication, division. In space, it has a specific internal architecture: a membrane, a nucleus, organelles, gradients of chemicals. In motion, signaling cascades and physical forces cause it to change shape, move, divide, or die. If you describe only the sequence of stages without the spatial organization, or only the organization without the dynamics, you are missing crucial parts of what a cell is. In psychology, think about forming a habit. In time, you repeat an action. You practice, you fail, you try again, you slowly improve. In space, there is a pattern of connections between neurons and brain areas that becomes more stable. In motion, there are learning rules, ways in which repeated activity strengthens or weakens synapses that transform a loose behavior into an automatic response. The habit is the same phenomenon seen through three different doors. In society, consider evolution. In time, there is a buildup of tensions, key triggering events, periods of chaos, and a new order emerging. In space, there is a pattern of people in streets and institutions: protests here, negotiations there, power centers shifting location. In motion, there are rules of interaction: how rumors spread, how loyalty flips, how fear and hope reshape behavior. Again, one phenomenon, three echoes. When you start to notice this across many domains, the triune structure stops feeling like an abstract idea and starts feeling like a simple description of how reality presents itself whenever it has enough richness to be called a world. This already hints at the scientific heart of the dimensional echo. Any complete description of a physical phenomenon must, in principle, be able to tell all three stories. It must describe how things unfold in sequence, how things are arranged in coexistence, and how one arrangement transforms into another according to specific rules. To see how deep this goes, let us look again at the basic derivatives we have been using. Consider omega, the time derivative of phi. At first, it seems to belong only to the time world. But to define omega, we silently use all three axes. We compare phi at two different instants, sequence. We insist that we are talking about the same spatial slot when we compare them, coexistence. And we take a limit as the time step shrinks, a controlled transformation. Omega is not purely temporal. It is a hybrid question that already involves space and motion. The same is true for the spatial gradient k. To define a gradient, we compare phi at neighboring locations, space. We insist on doing this at the same instant, time, and we think about moving a small amount in the domain, motion, to see how quickly the value changes. Again, all three aspects are quietly present inside a single derivative. Even higher derivatives, like mixed second derivatives, make this mixture even clearer. A quantity like how the temporal rate of change varies across space is literally a question about the interaction of sequence, coexistence, and transformation. The more deeply we probe phi, the more obvious the triune nature becomes. In the master tree of the Holophase language, the dimensional echo is not drawn as a separate branch. It is more like the light that shines on every branch and leaf. You cannot point to any single leaf and say, this is only time, or this is only space. Each leaf, each specific derivative or pattern, will always have a time reading, a space reading, and a motion reading. Some leaves emphasize one aspect more strongly, but none are truly one-dimensional. For example, the tower we call temporal focuses on derivatives with respect to the sequence axis. Yet each one is defined at spatial locations and carries implications for motion. The tower we call spatial focuses on how phi differs across coexistence slots, yet each derivative is anchored at an instant in time and participates in future evolution. The mixed tower, where V and more complex operators live, simply makes this blending explicit. The dimensional echo is therefore the answer to a subtle question. How do we know that our three axes are not three different substances, but three perspectives on one reality? The answer is that every object we study inside the language naturally speaks all three dialects at once. What does this mean for our understanding of reality's story? It means that any phenomenon you look at can be described as a chronicle, as a map, and as a dance. Take something as ordinary as a person walking across a room. You can describe it as a sequence. First, they were by the door, then by the table, then by the window. This is the temporal echo. You can describe the same event as a spatial pattern at each moment. At this instant, the person is here, the furniture is there, the walls and objects form a particular scene. That is the spatial echo. You can also describe it as a transformation. Muscles generate forces, feet push against the floor, friction and balance rules guide the shifting of weight, and these rules transform one posture into the next. That is the motion echo. One simple act, three complementary ways of seeing. We can go further and look at a falling leaf. In the time description, you track the moments. The stem weakens, the leaf detaches, it tilts, it spirals, it lands. You could draw a graph of its height versus time and see its descent. In the space description, you freeze one instant and see its position above the ground, its angle, the nearby branches, the shape of the air currents. You see a scene. In the motion description, you talk about gravity, air resistance, turbulence, the way the leaf's broad surface catches the air and converts falling into fluttering. You describe the rules that link each posture to the next. Again, three lenses, one event. We can also look inside the body at a heartbeat. In time, you feel the repeating rhythm, lub dub, beat after beat. In space, you see different parts of the heart, atria and ventricles, arranged in a specific structure, with valves and vessels branching out. In motion, you learn that an electrical wave travels through this structure in a precise order, causing each chamber to contract at the right moment to pump blood efficiently. One heartbeat, three inseparable aspects. The dimensional echo does an important job. It protects coherence. The stories we tell with clocks, with maps, and with laws of motion must fit together. If your clock-based account says something took 2 seconds, your map-based account says the person moved 3 meters, and your motion-based account says their speed was 1 meter per second, then the three stories are incompatible. Either the timing, the distance, or the motion rule is wrong. In reality, when our models are accurate, these perspectives lock together. The numbers match. The film, the photograph, and the equation all point to the same underlying process. Seen this way, physics is partly the art of making sure the three echoes line up. A good theory is one where the temporal evolution, the spatial structure, and the laws of motion are all expressions of a single, deeper order. This gives us a simple, practical test for any theory or explanation, even in everyday life. Ask three questions of it. Does it make sense as a timeline? Does it make sense as a structure you could, in principle, map? Does it make sense as a lawful transformation from one state to another? If any one of these three tests fails badly, your explanation is probably missing something. For example, if someone proposes a story about an event that has a clear sequence, but no plausible mechanism, no motion logic that could actually connect the steps, then the motion echo is broken. If someone proposes a description of a system that has a rich spatial picture, but no account of how it got there or where it is going, then the time echo is underdeveloped. If someone gives only equations of motion without ever saying what is moving and where, the space echo is thin. You can even see some scientific puzzles as places where the three echoes are struggling to line up. In quantum mechanics, for instance, we have a smooth mathematical story of time evolution, and we have spatial patterns of measurement outcomes, but connecting them with a clear motion-like rule that everyone agrees on is still philosophically challenging. Part of the discomfort comes from the feeling that the triune harmony is not yet perfect in our language there. Now let us bring this all the way back to phi. Phi in the holophase picture is the one underlying field from which all patterns arise. Its derivatives give us an infinite toolbox of questions to ask about its behavior. When we arrange these questions into our three towers, we are not creating three different realities, we are slicing one reality into three comprehensible views. Time as sequence tells us how phi's story is ordered. Space as coexistence tells us how phi's values are distributed within each step of that story. Motion as transformation tells us how one distribution leads to the next according to rules. The dimensional echo is the statement that no matter where you enter the structure, you will eventually find all three. Whenever a new structure appears in the unfolding of phi, a wave, a particle-like excitation, a stable pattern, a complex system, even a conscious observer, it will always have a timeline, a spatial form, and a way of changing. Remove any one of these, and the structure ceases to be fully real. This has a practical implication for how you can train your own perception. You can develop triune sight by deliberately asking three questions of anything you encounter. First, what is its story in time? How did it come to be, and how might it change? Second, what is its shape in space? How is it arranged, internally and externally? Third, what is its rule of transformation? Given its current state, what kinds of change are easy for it, and what kinds are difficult? Do this with a cloud, with a city, with a friendship, with your own thinking. Over time, you will begin to see the same underlying pattern: sequence, coexistence, and transformation, echoing again and again. You can even apply this triune questioning to your own inner life. Your emotions have a timeline. They rise, peak, and fade. That is the temporal echo. They also have a spatial spread inside your body. Tightness here, warmth there, pressure in the chest, lightness in the limbs. That is the coexistence echo. And they have transformation rules. Certain thoughts, memories, and actions tend to turn fear into calm or irritation into understanding. That is the motion echo. Seeing yourself this way is seeing yourself as a living phi pattern. At the level of deep theory, the dimensional echo becomes a requirement. If we propose the fundamental ingredient of reality that had no way to be placed in sequence, no way to be related in space, and no way to transform according to rules, we would not really be talking about something physical. We would be inventing a word without a meaning in the holophase language. The holophase claim is bold but simple. Anything that truly belongs to the story of existence can be expressed as some configuration of phi and its derivatives, and that configuration can always be read along the three axes we have explored. If there were a phenomenon that refused all three readings, no temporal narrative, no spatial aspect, no lawful transformation, it would lie outside the language we are building. It would be a signal that our model is incomplete. So far, however, every domain we know, from planetary motion to quantum processes, from chemical reactions to biological growth, from neural activity to human experience, can be spoken in this triune way. That is why the dimensional echo is not only a philosophical idea, it is an empirical pattern. And remember, in the wider Holophase program, this is not happening in isolation. Earlier episodes walked us up the lower branches of the master tree of language, from the raw phase itself to its first derivatives, to fields, to structures, to the beginnings of dynamics. Episode 7 turned those ideas into a practical alphabet, a way of naming and combining the letters of phi. Episode 8 has taken a step back into the purely abstract sky, asking what this alphabet looks like before it writes any particular universe. By reaching the dimensional echo here in part 27, we have climbed to a point on the tree where you can look down and see the whole path you have traveled. You can see that every letter, every derivative, every pattern you have met so far has always been speaking in three directions at once, even when we did not yet have the names for them. You can test this for yourself in daily life. Take boiling water on a stove. In time, you notice it warming, then forming tiny bubbles, then rolling at a full boil. In space, you see calm regions, violent regions, rising steam, cooler air. In motion, you understand that heat energy enters from below, convection currents stir the fluid, and the rules of thermodynamics and fluid dynamics govern the dance. When all three descriptions point to the same reality, you are seeing the dimensional echo in action. You can also test it in a conversation between two people. In time, you watch the turns. One speaks, the other responds, then the first clarifies, then both laugh. In space, you notice posture, distance, eye contact, the way their bodies are arranged. In motion, you sense the rules of interaction: respect, curiosity, defensiveness, trust. These rules transform misunderstanding into clarity, or sometimes clarity into conflict. Again, the three echoes are present. As we close this part, let us zoom out and remember where we are in the journey. Episode 8 has been devoted to the pure abstract language of reality, what phi is as a language, before we plug in specific physical constants, particles, or forces. We have built this language step by step: alphabet, grammar, semantics, information, computation, and finally dimensionality. In earlier parts, we purified time and space. In the previous part, we explored motion as transformation. Now, in part 27, we have woven them back into one triune echo. From now on, whenever we speak of any structure in Holophase, whether it is a simple wave or an entire universe, we will automatically understand that it lives simultaneously in these three dimensions. They are not optional extras. They are the basic directions in which phi can be read. The next and final book of episode 8 will focus on consistency. Once a language this powerful is defined, we must ask, how does it avoid contradiction? How does it ensure that all three echoes stay in tune, and that the stories it can tell do not tear themselves apart? That is the task of Book 8.8, Abstract Consistency. For now, let this image stay with you. One white light, three colors. One story, three readings. One field, three dimensions. When you look at the world right now, try to hear the triple harmony underneath the noise: the beat of time, the spread of space, and the flow of motion, all echoing as different faces of one simple, profound truth. Salam, and peace be upon you.